At 1 a.m., my daughter collapsed at my door, beaten and broken by her own husband. And all because of his mistress. What happened that night changed everything. And before you skip this video, I promise, you'll want to hear every second of it. By the way, this channel is still new, and your support means the world to me. Please subscribe and like this video. Let's hit 1,000 subscribers together. And when you subscribe, comment below what number subscriber you became. I'll be reading every single one. The desert night was still when it happened. At exactly 1:04 a.m., pounding erupted against my front door. Frantic, uneven, almost wild. I wasn't asleep. Mothers never truly sleep when their children are out there in the world. "Mom, please open up!" My heart clenched at the sound of her voice. It was Emma, my only daughter. I yanked the door open, and before I could even take a breath, she collapsed straight into my arms. Her lip was split, one eye swollen shut, and her trembling hands pressed against her ribs as if she were trying to hold herself together. In that moment, I didn't think. I just moved. I dragged her inside, lowered her onto the couch, and grabbed the thickest blanket from the armchair. When I looked up, I caught sight of my police badge and uniform hanging neatly on the hallway wall. And right then, I realized, tonight I wasn't just a mother. I was also an officer, and both of those roles were about to be tested. But before I go further, let me tell you who we are. My name is Caroline West, but most folks in our town just call me Carrie. I've been a patrol sergeant in a quiet desert town in New Mexico for over 20 years. People here think they know everyone's business, but the truth? Secrets rot quietly behind closed doors, until nights like this. My daughter, Emma, is 27. She grew up chasing fireflies in the backyard, belting out every pop song that hit the radio, and swearing to me she'd always find her way back home. And she did, but not like this. Recently, I'd noticed her becoming quieter, distant. I told myself it was just stress from her marriage, from work. But deep down, I knew better. I pressed a cool towel against her split lip. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. "Stay with me, baby. You're safe now," I whispered. But then, her phone lit up on the coffee table. The screen flashed with missed calls. Message after message, all from her husband, Daniel Reed. One message burned into my memory. "Say a word, and you'll regret it. Keep quiet if you want to keep everything." My blood turned to fire. I reached for the phone, ready to call him back, ready to scream, but Emma snatched it from me with shaking hands. "Mom, don't, please. It'll only make it worse." Her voice was ragged, broken. I wanted to push her for answers. I wanted to storm out and put Daniel in cuffs right then, but instead I just held her hand tighter. Inside, I made a silent promise. This night would not pass without a record. I was going to document everything. I called the ER, demanded a bed ready. With no car available, I ordered a cab, holding Emma close until it arrived. At Riverton General, the fluorescent hospital lights cut through the dark like knives. Dr. Meera Patel, someone I'd worked with countless times before on late-night calls, met us at the door. Her eyes swept over Emma's injuries. Without hesitation, she guided her into an exam room. The nurses moved carefully, checking vitals, lifting her shirt, and gasping at the deep bruise blooming across her stomach. Dr. Patel ordered scans immediately, her face calm but edged with concern. As they worked, I whispered to the charge nurse, "Make sure every photo, every note goes in her file. And I'll need copies." The nurse nodded quietly. She'd seen this before. Too many times. Emma clutched my hand through the scans, whispering through tears, "Don't let him find me." I leaned close, steady and firm. He won't. Not while I'm breathing. By dawn, we walked out with x-rays, imaging results, medical photographs, discharge papers, a file thick with evidence. It wasn't just treatment. It was testimony. When we got back home, the first pink rays of sunrise were stretching over the street. Across the way, my neighbor, Dolores Johnson, a retired school teacher, was sweeping her porch. She saw us and hurried over, her eyes wide. "Carrie, I heard the pounding and crying last night. Is everything all right?" I hesitated, but then told her the truth in a low voice. It was Emma. Her husband hurt her. She came here in the middle of the night. Dolores's jaw tightened. Her broom shook in her grip. That man has no shame. Then suddenly, her eyes lit up. My porch camera records everything. Maybe it caught her arriving. Together, we pulled up the app. And there it was. Time-stamped, clear as day. 1:04 a.m., Emma knocking weakly on my door, her voice desperate. Hearing her sobs again made my chest ache. But it also lit something inside me. This was crucial. This was proof. "Send me a copy, Dolores," I said. She pressed my hand. "Whatever you need. I'll testify." Back inside, I saved the footage to an encrypted drive, backing it up twice. For the first time, I felt the scales begin to tip. We weren't just running scared anymore. We were building a case. The morning after the hospital, I thought things might calm down. I thought maybe, just maybe, the worst had passed. I was wrong. At 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. The name flashing across the screen was Caleb Morris, a clerk at the county records office, someone I'd known for years. His voice was tight with unease. "Carrie, I didn't want to leave this on voicemail. Your daughter's name, and yours, just popped up on a land transfer file. Something about it didn't sit right, so I thought I'd warn you." My stomach knotted. "What transfer?" Caleb exhaled hard. "According to the file, Emma signed her share of the West family land over to a woman named Sophie Lane. But listen, Carrie, the signatures don't look right. And the notary stamp? The guy wasn't even on duty that day." I drove straight to Caleb's office. He slid the folder across his desk. My eyes fell on the jagged handwriting, my name and Emma's scrawled across the page like a mockery. It didn't even resemble our signatures. "This came in from Daniel," Caleb whispered. "He told my staff you asked him to file it because you were busy." My hands clenched around the folder until my knuckles turned white. That land wasn't just property. It was Emma's inheritance, my father's sweat, the one thing he left us. And now Daniel was trying to steal it with a pen. "Get me certified copies of every single page," I said. Caleb nodded quickly. "Be careful, Carrie. Someone inside helped push this through." Walking out with the documents under my arm, I realized we weren't just fighting bruises anymore. We were up against lies etched in ink. The next morning, I drove to Daniel's pawn shop on the edge of town, Desert Gold Exchange. The place reeked of stale beer and motor oil. A couple of his buddies lounged near the counter, smirking as I walked past. "Well, if it isn't the mother-in-law," one of them sneered. I ignored him, shoved open the office door. Daniel sat behind a chipped desk, counting stacks of bills. He looked up with that smug grin I'd grown to hate. "Sergeant West," he drawled. "Here to buy or just to nag?" I dropped a folder on his desk and slid it across. Inside were the photos of Emma's injuries, the ER report, stills from Dolores's porch camera, and the forged deed. Each page was a nail. For a flicker of a second, his grin faltered. But then it returned, sharper. "And what do you expect me to do with this?" he said. "I've got better lawyers than you." I met his gaze. My voice was steady. "I don't expect you to do anything. The court will handle it." His jaw tightened. "That girl of yours needed discipline. Don't think your badge will always save you." The words lit a fire in my chest, but I didn't flinch. I gathered the file, stood, and stared him down. "From now on, it's not your rules. It's the law." I walked out, leaving his anger boiling behind me. By the end of the week, the gossip mill was in full swing. At the farmer's market, whispers trailed behind me. "She's just using her badge to get back at her son-in-law." Emma probably made the whole thing up. You know how young wives are. Each word cut like glass, but I kept my head high. That night, I returned home to find an unmarked envelope shoved under my front door. Inside, a scrap of paper with shaky handwriting. "Shut up, or you'll lose your daughter." My hands trembled, not with fear, but with fury. I slipped the note straight into the evidence folder. Then I called my captain, Joel Ramirez. "Joel, I need extra patrols around Dolores Johnson's house. Emma's staying there. I won't risk Daniel's men sniffing around." His voice was firm, but cautious. "Carrie, you're walking a dangerous line. But I'll back you up. Just keep documenting everything." I knew the case would stay weak unless someone from Daniel's circle came forward, and that person was Sophie Lane, the mistress. She'd been showing up on Daniel's arm while Emma nursed bruises at home. She was the name on the forged deed. Through whispers at a diner, I learned Sophie often spent evenings at a dim-lit bar called the Copper Horse at the far edge of town. So one Thursday night, I put on an old jacket and cap, slipped into a corner booth, and waited. Around 10:15, Sophie walked in. Red dress, dark lipstick, confidence painted on her face, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who knew she was in too deep. When she sat near me, I slid an envelope across the table. Inside, copies of the forged deed with her name on it, along with records of her debts. "Daniel can't protect you," I said quietly. "But the truth might." At first, she laughed, but as she flipped through the papers, her hand trembled. The color drained from her face. "He promised me land. A new start," she whispered. "I see now. He just used me." I leaned closer. "You have one chance to walk away clean. Testify. Tell the court what really happened." Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me. After a long pause, she nodded. "I'll do it, but promise me I'll be safe." For the first time, I felt the tide shift. 2 days later, at attorney Marcus Hale's office, we spread the evidence across a long oak table. Photos of Emma's bruises, the ER report with Dr. Patel's signature, Dolores's porch video, the threatening note, the forged deed, and now, Sophie's signed and notarized statement, promising to testify, piece by piece. It formed a wall Daniel could not climb. Marcus tapped each file as he organized them. Exhibit A, medical records. Exhibit B, video evidence. Exhibit C, text threats. Exhibit D, fraudulent deed. Exhibit E, witness statement. "It's solid." I exhaled for the first time in days. Marcus looked me in the eye. "This gives us leverage, but we need protection orders immediately." That afternoon, Judge Keaton signed a temporary restraining order, barring Daniel from contacting Emma or Sophie. Captain Ramirez arranged safe lodging for them both, away from his reach, and for the first time in weeks, I slept without pacing the hallway. The case was no longer a scattered pile of fears. It was becoming a wall of truth, a shield made of evidence that Daniel couldn't break with his lies. When the hearing date finally arrived, the courthouse was packed. Neighbors, co-workers, strangers, everyone came, hungry for drama. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of the crowd, and whispers rippled like restless wind. At exactly 9 a.m., Judge Raymond Keaton walked in, his gavel striking down. The room fell silent. Attorney Marcus Hale rose first. His voice was firm, steady, commanding. "Your Honor, this case is not about gossip. It is about records, injuries, and evidence that speaks louder than rumor." He began with the medical file. Dr. Meera Patel took the stand, her voice calm, professional, devastatingly clear. She explained Emma's contusions, the scans, the bruises. She described why her injuries could not have come from a fall or accident. They were consistent with blunt force, a fist, a kick. Gasps whispered through the crowd. Next, Marcus cued the projector. On the screen flickered Dolores Johnson's porch camera footage. 1:04 a.m. Emma knocking weakly on my door, her voice breaking, her body trembling. The sound filled the courtroom. Her faint sobs, her desperate cry. I heard people shift in their seats. Some covered their mouths. Others just stared, speechless. Then came the threatening text messages. Blown up large on the screen, each message seared into the silence. "Say a word, and you'll regret it. Keep quiet if you want to keep everything." Authenticated by phone records. Time-stamped, unshakable. The forged deed followed. Clerk Caleb Morris took the stand, pointing out the mismatched notary stamp, the false signatures. "This was pushed through illegally," he testified. "These are not authentic records." But the moment that shifted the room came next. Sophie Lane stepped forward. She walked slowly, clutching her statement, her red dress replaced with a plain gray sweater. Her voice shook, but she spoke anyway. "Daniel promised me land if I signed the papers. He said Emma would never fight back. He lied to her, and he lied to me." The crowd erupted in whispers. Daniel shot up from his chair, face red, veins straining at his neck. "You traitor!" he shouted. The judge's gavel slammed down. "Order, Mr. Reed, sit down!" The bailiff stood ready until Daniel slumped back into his chair, seething. Finally, it was my turn. I stood tall in my uniform, my badge gleaming under the courtroom lights. "I've worn this badge for over 20 years, I said, my voice steady. "But today I stand here as a mother. My daughter came to my door broken, terrified, and bleeding. Not because of an accident, but because of the man sitting at that table. He is not a protector. He is an abuser, and the law must answer." Daniel's attorney, Victor Ames, tried to spin it. He called Sophie a liar, accused Emma of exaggeration, even suggested I use my badge to harass my son-in-law, but each attempt broke against the hard wall of evidence, documents, photos, video, medical records, threats, fraud, witness, testimony. The truth stood taller than his excuses. By the time Marcus Hale closed his argument, the room was silent, the kind of silence that presses down on your chest. The evidence had spoken louder than the gossip ever could. Judge Keaton returned after a long recess, his voice steady as he read the ruling. First, a permanent protective order is granted for Emma West, barring Daniel Reed from any form of contact. Second, the forged deed transferring family property is nullified and void, restoring the land to its rightful owner. Third, all assets under Mr. Reed's name are frozen pending criminal investigation. Finally, this court refers the matter to the district attorney for charges including domestic violence, fraud, and witness intimidation. The room erupted in murmurs. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered prayers. Daniel slumped back in his chair, his smug grin gone, his face pale. His lawyer shuffled papers without meeting his eyes. 2 deputies stepped forward. The sharp clink of handcuffs echoed through the courtroom like a final verdict. Daniel's face twisted, but there was no escape. As they led him away, he glanced back once, panic clouding the eyes that had once held only arrogance. I reached for Emma's hand. She was trembling, but when she exhaled, it sounded like freedom. Justice didn't erase her pain, but it carved out a path toward safety. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Healing never moves in straight lines. Emma often jolted awake in the middle of the night, her body rigid, her eyes darting to the door. Sometimes she cried out, certain Daniel was standing outside. Each time I sat beside her bed, holding her hand until her breathing steadied. Dr. Naomi Winters, a therapist recommended by Marcus, began meeting with Emma twice a week. Slowly, she learned grounding exercises, counting objects in the room, steadying her breath, writing her fears instead of burying them. It wasn't magic, but it gave her tools to face the shadows. And then, small victories began to appear. One morning, she walked to the store alone without scanning every doorway. Another night, she cooked dinner and hummed softly to a song she used to love. The first time I heard her laugh again, it startled me. It nearly brought me to tears. For the first time in months, there was light breaking through. The gavel had fallen. The chains had clinked shut. Daniel was gone from our home, but not from our minds. Because healing doesn't arrive the same way a judge delivers a verdict. Fast, final, loud. Healing creeps in slowly, quietly, like sunlight through blinds after a long night. And for Emma, the nights were still long. She woke often, her chest heaving, convinced that Daniel was at the door. Some nights she swore she heard his footsteps in the hall. Other times she pressed her palms over her ears, whispering, "Stop, stop, stop." I would sit with her, my hand on hers, until the storm inside her calmed. I didn't always know the right words, but sometimes presence speaks louder than advice. Dr. Naomi Winters was patient, steady. Twice a week, she guided Emma through breathing exercises, grounding techniques. She had Emma count the objects in the room, press her hands against a pillow, describe out loud what was real. "It's not magic," Naomi told us once, "but every small step is a victory." And she was right. One morning, Emma decided to walk to the grocery store alone. She came back 20 minutes later, trembling but smiling. "I didn't look over my shoulder once," she whispered. Another night, she made spaghetti and started humming along to an old song on the radio. The sound startled me. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed her voice filling the house. But the moment that caught me off guard most was simple. She laughed, just once. Short, soft, almost uncertain, and it nearly brought me to tears. As for me, I carried the weight of this case into my patrols. Whenever I met a woman sitting in her car, eyes swollen, voice trembling, whispering that she couldn't go home, I remembered Emma. I gave her the hotline number. I told her about safe shelters. Sometimes I just listened, because silence is what abusers feed on. And truth, even when heavy, even when slow, can set a person free. But not everyone in town wanted to see it that way. At church, I noticed whispers, heads turning, lips curling. Some said Emma should have kept quiet. Others hinted that maybe she had pushed Daniel too far. That's the cruel part of gossip. It doesn't need proof, just eager ears. But I didn't bend, and neither did Emma. When Sophie Lane agreed to testify against Daniel, she didn't disappear after the trial. She showed up at our door one afternoon, holding a box of files. "Emma," she said softly, "I'm sorry. I thought I was winning something when I stood beside him, but all I was doing was losing myself. I want to help now, however I can." Emma hesitated, then stepped aside. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Inside the box were emails, documents, receipts. Sophie had kept records of Daniel's schemes, things the prosecutors hadn't even uncovered yet. It was more than evidence. It was leverage. Meanwhile, Daniel's frozen assets meant he was scrambling. His once proud empire of manipulation was crumbling. Old friends turned their backs. Business partners refused his calls, and though he was out on bail waiting for the criminal trial, the smugness was gone. I knew it. I saw it in his eyes during the last hearing. Fear had finally found him. At home, Emma began journaling, at Naomi's suggestion. At first, her words were short, scared, angry, tired. But slowly, the pages filled with more. Grateful, stronger, free. One night, she showed me something she wrote. "I used to think the night I knocked on your door was the worst night of my life. But now I think it was the bravest, because it was the night I chose to live." I couldn't speak. I just pulled her close. The truth is, life didn't return to the way it was before Daniel. It couldn't. But maybe it wasn't supposed to. Maybe what we were building now, with pain acknowledged, scars visible, voices unbroken, was something stronger. Something no abuser could take. And the more Emma healed, the more I realized this story wasn't just about us. It was about every woman sitting in silence tonight, wondering if anyone would believe her. It was about every mother who lies awake praying her daughter is safe. It was about every neighbor who hears screams through the wall and debates if they should call. Because silence doesn't protect victims. It protects abusers. And telling the truth, out loud, documented in court, in community. That is what shatters their grip. So when I speak to you now, through this story, I'm not just sharing what happened to Emma, I'm telling you. If you're listening and this feels familiar, if you've ever hidden bruises under long sleeves, or erased threatening texts, or smiled in public when you were breaking in private, you are not alone. There are people ready to stand with you. Police officers, lawyers, therapists, advocates, shelters, hotlines, even strangers on the internet who will type, "I believe you," and mean it. You don't have to go. Through this in silence, the trial was over. The verdict had been spoken. But for us, the journey wasn't finished, because justice in a courtroom is only one piece. Healing happens in kitchens, in therapy rooms, in the quiet moments when nightmares still come, and in the brave seconds when a survivor whispers, "I'm ready to live again." And that's where we were now. Emma started to find rhythm in small things. She planted flowers outside the porch, daisies and lavender, her favorites. Every morning she watered them, humming quietly. To anyone else it might have looked ordinary, but to me it was extraordinary, because these weren't just flowers. They were proof she was still capable of growing beauty out of broken soil. she started cooking again. The kitchen filled with the smell of cinnamon rolls on Sunday mornings, the same scent I remembered from when she was a child. She even laughed more often. Not the nervous laugh that once covered pain, but genuine bubbling joy, the kind that reminded me of who she'd always been before Daniel's shadow. But not every day was light. There were still nights when she jolted awake, tears streaming down her face, convinced she heard his voice. There were afternoons when the weight of shame and memory made her stay in bed. Healing doesn't erase scars. It teaches you to live with them, and that's exactly what Emma was learning. One evening, she looked at me across the table and said softly, "Mom, I don't want to be known just as the girl who was abused. I want to be known as the girl who survived." Her words sank deep, because survival is not weakness. Survival is power. As for Daniel, the world he built on lies had collapsed. His frozen accounts, his broken reputation, his mistress testifying against him, his fraud exposed in court. It all left him stripped bare. The criminal trial loomed, and though he strutted with his lawyers, the truth had already caged him tighter than any prison. He wasn't untouchable anymore. And more importantly, Emma wasn't under his control anymore. But here's what I realized. This story, our story, isn't just about Emma, or me, or even Daniel. It's about every person watching this right now who might feel trapped in silence. It's about the mother who hides her daughter's bruises with makeup because she's scared of what people will say. It's about the husband, the brother, the friend who suspects something but stays quiet because it feels uncomfortable. And it's about you. Yes, you listening right now. Because silence is the enemy. Silence is the shield abusers hide behind. But speaking, documenting, sharing, testifying, that is what shatters the cycle. So I'm asking you to do two things tonight. First, if you are living something like this, don't wait. Don't excuse it. Don't let shame be louder than your safety. Call emergency services if you're in danger. Take photos of injuries. Save the messages. Keep the records. Because one day those small pieces of truth could be the wall that protects you in court. Second, if you're listening and you've never faced this but you believe in truth, then help me spread it. Our channel is still new. I need your support. Subscribe right now, hit like, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. And let me know. When you hit subscribe, what number did you become? 500? 700? 1,000? Because every single subscriber means this story reaches farther. Every comment means someone scrolling through might realize they're not alone. You don't know whose life you might save just by being here. When I look back at that night, 1 a.m., Emma collapsing at my door, her face bruised, her spirit almost broken, I don't see defeat anymore. I see courage. I see a daughter who knocked when it was hardest. I see a mother who fought not with anger, but with evidence, with law, with truth. And I see a future where Emma is no longer defined by what happened to her, but by the fact that she survived it. So if you take anything away from this story, let it be this. Silence only serves those who harm. Speaking up, however shaky, however slow, is what opens the door to freedom. And if Emma could knock on mine at her lowest moment, then maybe this story is your knock tonight. Answer it. Speak. Choose to live. Because freedom is waiting on the other side.